You may recall that a couple days ago I talked about Electronic Arts being sued by two lawyers in France because of their shady business practices with FIFA 20. The two lawyers in question are Karim Morand-Louzi and Victor Zaguri, who are representing a client going by the name Mamadou, who is a 32-year-old chauffeur, and they told this news outlet L'Equipe in France that he splashed out 600 euros on FIFA Ultimate Team packs since the release of FIFA 20 last September. And he revealed that the best card he pulled from any pack was Napoli defender Kostas Manolas, who was rated 85 in Ultimate Team. And Mamadou is basically fed up with the shady business model that FIFA 20 is enacting with the card packs that are essentially pay-to-win loot boxes, and so these two lawyers are taking whatever legal recourse they can to bring down FIFA and EA a couple notches. Now here's an interesting development. Those two lawyers were invited by Psycho17, who is a former EA partner, to his channel in order to discuss this case and what possible recourses there are to pursue legally to tackle FIFA 20 gambling, and they provided some insight about just how serious they are about this case and what paths they ultimately want to pursue and why they believe that FIFA 20 is completely unethical. If you want to watch this video, which is over an hour long, there's going to be a link in the description, but I've gone ahead and compiled all the important bits of information about this case and what was ultimately said in Psycho17's video. It's pretty interesting stuff. So they begin with introductions. YouTuber Psycho17 is the host of the interview, and as I mentioned before, he's a former EA partner and someone who plays FIFA quite a bit and has been through the ups and downs of this game series. And then we have Victor Zaguri, who's a lawyer and member of the Paris Bar and practiced law for 10 years. He's also a law professor. And then finally, Karim Morand-Louzi is also a lawyer and a member of the Paris Bar, and he's worked with Victor for 7 years. And they're both specialists in criminal law, and both of them also claim to be soccer and video game fans, and they just do not like how FIFA has been handling their monetization system for all these years now. And so they talked about how two clients came to see them who were fed up with FIFA and its monetization systems. They then, as far as how they can react to this, talked about 3 potential avenues. The first recourse is the need for the community of FIFA players to come together and join forces against EA, kind of like what happened with Battlefront 2 and that backlash, which eventually resulted in EA having to completely remove the loot boxes and overhaul Battlefront 2 as a whole, due to the fact that after people during the beta realized how shady Battlefront 2 was, there was a huge drop in pre-order numbers. The Metacritic, as far as user score goes, was incredibly low, and even critic scores were much lower than anticipated. And there was also that whole case of the lowest rated Reddit comment in history, with a community manager who said that it's all about a sense of pride and accomplishment, that whole bullshit. So that kind of backlash and players coming together in unison goes a long way. But FIFA, according to the lawyers, unfortunately does not have that level of a solid community who are forming a united front. While there are many who are peeved about FIFA's practices, there are also plenty of others who just kind of go along with it. It's been normalized for them, and they don't just speak out about it. And then the second angle that the lawyers discussed was institutions and having them regulate FIFA 20 loot boxes and similar types of monetization systems. 2 specific organizations were brought up. One of them is called ARGEL, A-R-J-E-L, which is a regulatory body for online games and online gambling. And then the second organization is the DGCCRF, which is an anti-fraud organization that's supposed to protect consumers against shady business practices. It was noted how back in 2017, the ARGEL president actually posted an open letter about how gambling introduced in games are dangerous and unacceptable and how something needed to be done. But then 1 year later, for some reason, the president did a 180, changed his stance completely, talked about how protecting the interest of the games industry, protecting jobs, etc. was more important. And it's hard to say why that happened. Maybe he was lobbied, which is commonplace in politics, but out of the blue, ARGEL was just not committing to do anything about FIFA 20 and similar games. So FIFA currently does not have a unified front against loot boxes, and institutions like Argel are not really doing anything about the issue. So that leaves us with a third angle, which is to take legal action and file a criminal complaint, which is what the two French lawyers are currently doing. Karim specifically said that the laws to tackle loot boxes actually already exist in France if you look at them, and it is possible to stop these predatory practices in games. It's just that nobody's taken the law in their hands to pursue a case against EA. Organizations like Argel are just not doing anything. So right now, the lawyers' plans to pursue this case is to refer the matter to the prosecutor's office where the clients live. They have two clients, they live in different parts of France, and in those parts of France that are different. Prosecutor's office, their goal is to refer the situation to those prosecutor's office, and if those prosecutor's office don't start an investigation within 3 months from that submission, then the lawyers can apparently file a complaint as civil intervening parties and refer the matter to an investigating judge. So that's their current recourse. And then the interviewer asked if France can take similar measures as Belgium did when it comes to telling companies like EA to stop selling FIFA points because they don't meet certain guidelines when it comes to gambling laws. Victor said that there are a couple angles they can take. So one potential offense that FIFA might have engaged in is what they called misleading commercial practices. They specifically talked about how FIFA displays these special offers for card packs as if to imply that there is a reduced price, but FIFA card packs have never changed in price. They have remained exactly the same for all these years. No discounts whatsoever. The only real special offer is that these specified card packs are put out there for a limited time to incite a rush out of fear of missing out, but there's no real value that is offered with these special offers. There's no discounts, anything of the sort, and so there might be tangible legal measures that can be pursued because EA might have engaged in the offense called misleading commercial practices. And then another angle that the lawyer cited is what's called prohibited lotteries. Victor said that according to the National Security Code, the definition of lottery is something that is a public offer, is a financial sacrifice, has elements of chance, and there is a hope of winning. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean there's a hope of winning money, just a hope of winning something of value. A lot of companies have tried to use the "it's only cosmetics" excuse to get away with shady loot box practices, but the fact of the matter is that people find a lot of value in cosmetics. The way they and their avatars appear online, it may not be monetary value, but it is emotionally valuable enough that people can get hooked to loot boxes. And then going back to the issue of a lack of transparency, Victor talked about how EA tried to pretend like they're doing something good by disclosing odds, but then with vague stats like less than 1%, they could be talking about 0.01% to get a card or 0.00001% to get a specific player card. There's a huge difference there, so EA saying less than 1% doesn't actually tell you much of anything as far as specific odds go. The lawyers also brought up how EA is able to regulate its own market within FIFA without any oversight, and many other games are able to do the same thing because the games industry currently has no oversight. What this essentially does is give companies like EA carte blanche to change parameters like the value of certain in-game rewards, the odds of obtaining them. They can shift the market in any way they want and exploit customers that way to maximize revenue. It was also brought up that because FIFA is an annual release, you purchase something that will eventually become obsolete in just a year. We're also talking about the in-game purchases made within games like FIFA 20. When you move to FIFA 21, you're essentially starting from scratch. The in-game items in FIFA 20 don't carry over to FIFA 21, they become obsolete, and so that's another shady element of the whole FIFA franchise. On that front, the lawyer described something that's called a planned obsolescence case, and they specifically referred to Apple being fined 25 million euros earlier this month for deliberately slowing down the older iPhone models without notice, and so that's pretty shady stuff that Apple actually did get fined over. There is actually articles about it. Here's one from BBC. It reads right here, Apple fined for slowing down old iPhones. Apple has been fined 25 million euros for deliberately slowing down older iPhone models without making it clear to consumers. And so FIFA has something similar where consumers aren't told about the fact that with every year a FIFA game becomes obsolete, that their lifespan is essentially 1 year due to the annual release nature of the FIFA franchise, and that the in-game purchases don't carry over and also become obsolete after a year. And then because EA is able to change parameters of things like player cards on a whim, what that means is that cards earned through paid loot boxes can become obsolete without notice if EA changes their stats. A really coveted player card might be valuable and really powerful one day, but then EA might nerf that card, and that might incite players into opening new loot boxes, new card packs that will hopefully yield the more effective players that have been buffed or that have been introduced. And just the ability for EA to change parameters on a whim allows them to pull schemes like this that psychologically manipulates the players. And then on top of that, the lawyers talked about addiction that is created through visual and audio effects like the ones you find in slot machines that trigger certain chemicals that create certain feelings and emotions that people can get addicted to, like the triggering of dopamine. The rush that people feel from that is something that people can get hooked to. So with all of these factors in mind, the lawyers made the case that game companies cannot set their own odds, that the odds themselves need to be regulated, and that proper disclosures need to be made. It was also noted that games like FIFA are self-contained markets where the game company itself acts as a monopoly over it, allowing them to again exploit the market and change parameters in any way. And one of the frustrations that the lawyers expressed is that within the FIFA community, there aren't a lot of people talking about these issues, which goes back to the point of there not being a united front against EA. The lawyers talked about how the pro players just kind of go along with what's there because they're under contract and it's their career, and if they speak out against EA, they could lose that contract. And then when it comes to FIFA YouTubers, most of them just look the other way. And then Psycho17 proceeded to talk a little bit about himself, how he used to be an EA partner for years, and while he's grateful for the opportunities that this partnership granted him, he left a few months ago because he had grievances about how EA got involved in the esports scene. And then on top of that, he talked about how complicated the FIFA community is, how there's just all kinds of different players engaging with different modes. And then Victor, one of the lawyers, interjected by saying that based on certain studies, it was shown that 70 to 75% of players play FIFA Ultimate Team, so they're engaged in that gambling system that's essentially pay to win. And then from there, Psycho17 talked about how his audience isn't just adults, but also children. A lot of kids play FIFA, a lot of kids love soccer, and FIFA is labeled a PEGI 3 game. And so Psycho17 didn't want to promote this game where you don't really improve by mastering the game, you improve by buying card packs, by gambling to get the best players, by engaging in this psychologically harmful loop. Psycho17 then asked the lawyers if it's legally viable to attack a big company like EA given the power and money and influence that they have. They could just hire an army of lawyers and drag this case out, is one of the notions that have spread. And as far as that goes, the lawyers noted that in a criminal matter, an investigating judge conducts an independent investigation, and also the public prosecutor becomes involved. And also in a criminal matter, the state becomes involved as well, especially when it comes to a matter as big as FIFA, which is one of the most popular products sold in France. The country loves soccer, and FIFA is a huge franchise there. So if there's potential criminal conduct involved with that game, you can bet that there's going to be a number of organizations and regulators who will come together to investigate this issue. And so the lawyers are basically saying that the odds aren't as stacked against them as people might think. It's not just a matter of EA can get away with it because they have a bunch of lawyers. And the lawyers also emphasize that there is power to the community, that companies like EA cannot thrive without the community. That's one thing that a lot of people forget, is the community is what empowers EA. It's what financially supports companies like EA, and they live off of exploiting the community. So if the community rises to the occasion, companies like EA will have no choice but to change the way they do things. That's the important thing to note about all of this, is that customers are the ones with the power, and unless the customers, the community, rises up to do something about a business practice they disagree with, companies like EA will continue to do so. And that's why a backlash on the level of Battlefront 2 is pivotal to enacting change. And then as far as what will happen in the months and weeks to come, what the lawyers will do, how they'll engage in this case, they talked about how they already filed the complaint, and then in 3 months, if nothing happens, they'll refer the matter to an investigating judge, after which there will be an investigation. And while they did note the whole ordeal could take a long time, they also did provide the assurance that if an investigating judge gets involved and if the community itself joins forces, regulators won't be able to turn a blind eye. The case could become big enough that matters could be expedited. And the lawyers also talked about how this isn't just a France issue. This is something that's been brought up in Belgium, in Netherlands, England, Australia, in the US. This is an international issue that's gaining a lot of traction from many consumer protection organizations and many legislators as well. So this discussion is going to continue to grow, and that could also help in expediting matters like this across the globe. And then the lawyers pointed out how there's also promotional elements that are shady as far as FIFA goes, because FIFA 20 will do something like use Zidane in the cover, who is a prominent French player, to entice people to buy the game, and yet in order to actually have the chance to play Zidane, especially in modes like Ultimate Team, you have to spend thousands of euros, and even then you're unlikely to get that player because the odds are so freaking low. Electronic Arts essentially dangles a carrot in front of customers, except that carrot is damn near unreachable except for a select few who happen to get super lucky and essentially win the lottery. Psycho17 then talked about his own experience of having spent 2,500 euros of his own money to buy these card packs, and he did so because he wanted to create the best content possible for his audience by opening these packs and earning the best players and being at the top of his game. But he only ended up with 2,500 euros spent, only getting 2 minor players from the Team of the Year roster. Psycho17 then expressed that what he ultimately wants is for FIFA to harken back to the good old days of, FIFA 12 and FIFA 13, when the game felt fun and fair. He expressed that he wants to play a soccer game, not a lottery game, and he wants to promote a healthy game, not one that is psychologically harmful. The conversation then shifted to EA giving leeway to YouTubers who use illegal websites that EA claims to, scorn and admonish, but EA lets them get away with it, and they let that slide because ultimately those YouTubers promote their game, promote the gambling aspect, promote the card packs, and so they kind of turned a blind eye to the illegal gambling website stuff that's happening with those content creators, which is incredibly duplicitous. Psycho17 then talked about the good old days when players could actually trade cards and sell cards through auctions, and so there was an avenue to get the cards that you wanted without engaging in gambling, but that option no longer exists. EA has essentially restricted those elements in order to have more control over their in-game economy and market, to have that monopoly over this self-contained market. There was also some discussion about algorithm manipulation that could occur based on the data collected about player behavior, with how they engage with card packs, when they buy card packs, and in what situations they buy card packs. They could use all of that information to create an algorithm that is as manipulative as possible. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of tangible evidence on that front because companies like Electronic Arts keep that kind of stuff close to their chest in terms of how they use player data and the kinds of programming that goes behind loot box systems, the algorithms that might be in place. But the lawyers did emphasize that that's something that has to be called into question, that governments and regulators need to look into that stuff and just ensure that nothing super shady is going on behind the scenes. And if there is, that stuff needs to be regulated. And then this whole interview concluded with a Q&A session. This was live streamed and there was an actual audience asking questions in the chat. And one of the questions that was asked to the lawyers is, what's the difference between Belgium and French gambling laws? The lawyer said that actually in both countries the laws are pretty similar. They said that French law does not specify that for something to be considered gambling, financial gain has to be involved. So just because you cannot cash out in a game doesn't necessarily mean that it's not gambling. But Argel, the online gambling regulation organization, recently took the position that money has to be involved for a game of chance to be considered gambling. And then the lawyers conveyed that in France, it actually does matter if you can resell a product or other monetary avenues that are more indirect. So they talked about, third-party websites or outlets like eBay where players can sell in-game items. While those are not websites that a company like Electronic Arts directly approves, the fact that it is possible to do this, the fact that FIFA can be used as a platform for illegal gambling online, opens up Electronic Arts and the FIFA franchise to potential criminal charges. So much like in Belgium, French laws do allow for companies like EA to be restricted and regulated. It's just that nobody's really taking that step, not even organizations like Argel, who are supposed to watch out for customers and the like. But it is in the two lawyers' belief that in France, loot boxes need to be regulated like how Belgium did it. EA, instead of trying to actually navigate through the gambling laws, they just pulled out and removed the ability for Belgian players to purchase FIFA points. They removed the ability to monetize loot boxes. And so if French laws can do what Belgium did, if French organizations or some entity can actually put the French laws in action, then we might see FIFA being forced to pull the ability to purchase FIFA points in France as well, thereby disabling this ability to pay to win and gamble to win. From there, after mention of all the research that's been put out there suggesting that loot boxes and gambling are in fact correlated based on these early findings, one of the questions that was asked is why people are only taking action now. As far as the lawyers go, well, it was only recently that clients actually raised that issue to them so they could pursue legal action. And then as far as the general public goes, well, people are now becoming more informed, especially after the Battlefront 2 fiasco. People have been much more vigilant about loot boxes and their adverse effects. It's only now that government bodies are realizing what a problem loot boxes have been for a while and still are. And as word continues to spread, the general audience is becoming aware of this stuff. Gamers are becoming less tolerant. So it's just one of those things that's going to take time and is going to continue to spread. It's going to continue to snowball. Now, should this lawsuit against EA be successful, one of the questions that was asked by one of the viewers was, what are the consequences that EA could face? What are the repercussions for a company like Electronic Arts? The lawyer said that while the law does allow for prison terms, the more likely outcome is that a fine would be issued, and it could be as big as 10% of all sales generated by illegal practices. And on top of that, EA may be forced to actually get an operator's permit from the online gambling regulation organization Argel. They may be forced to set up the appropriate self-exclusion systems, and EA would essentially have to treat loot boxes as if they were gambling, with the proper disclosures, ensuring that FIFA cannot be accessed by children, with the proper labels and the proper warnings. And even beyond that, if EA is prosecuted in this lawsuit, well, individual customers could actually produce bank statements and evidence that they suffered from FIFA loot boxes, and then those individual customers could take legal action and ask for compensation for damages. There are plenty of stories out there of families who have suffered because they bought this seemingly innocent soccer game that turned out to be a psychological monetization trap that caused, adults to become addicted, or kids unknowingly spending a bunch of money in card packs and emptying out their parents' bank accounts. So those families who suffered as a result of FIFA would have some legal recourse and the potential to be compensated for that. So if EA were to be prosecuted successfully, if this lawsuit were to be successful, it would open up the floodgates, it'd open up a lot of new doors, and EA would be tangibly pushed back. Last but not least, the lawyers and Psycho17 talked about something called scripting. Scripting is this theory that FIFA games are programmed to change the flow of a match whenever it's too one-sided. And while there's no concrete proof or evidence that this is really a thing, a lot of players have provided video examples on YouTube and the like, showing a potential example of how a match inexplicably shifts when a player is winning and doing really well. All of a sudden, their performance goes down dramatically, the difficulty's ramped up, whatever it is. And the lawyer said that they believe this isn't some conspiracy, that it isn't unlikely that something like scripting has been implemented in FIFA, even if the developers have denied it time and again. that something like scripting might be used to maximize engagement and maximize player spending. If a player's constantly winning, they're going to feel like their team is pretty perfect. They're going to feel pretty comfortable with the team that they have. They'll feel like they don't have to spend any more on loot boxes, whereas if they start losing more and more, they'll feel like, oh crap, there's something wrong with my team. I have to spend more on loot boxes and get more, just better players in order to improve my game. And so that kind of manipulation might be occurring through scripting. And while this is just a theory right now, it's all conjecture, lawyers raised this possibility and said that if they were to discover that EA and FIFA have been engaging in this kind of scripting scheme, that they've been programming the game to shadily and sort of sneakily be stacked against players who start winning too much in order to manipulate them into making, pay-to-win purchases, then that's another potential criminal charge or legal avenue that could be pursued. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all the information conveyed by the two lawyers who were interviewed by YouTuber Psycho17. A lot of interesting information here. It actually does feel like these two lawyers are serious about this. Whether anything tangible actually comes out of this remains to be seen. I have seen other situations where a lawyer claimed that they're going to sue a company, but nothing came out of it. I don't know if this is going to be one such case, or if these guys are deadly serious, and if over the months and years we will see this lawsuit go places and force EA's hand, push them back somehow. I certainly hope for the best, wish these two lawyers the best. If there are any updates on this, I'll be sure to let you know, but for now, yeah, this is kind of what the lawyers are saying. They seem to be saying all the right things, but whether they make any progress or this all ends up fizzling out, only time will tell. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on these two lawyers' lawsuit against EA, whether you think this could actually cause substantial change, whether you think this lawsuit could be successful. Drop a comment below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!